Alrighty, I think we're live, Nick. So nice to see your face again. Nice to hear your voice. How have you been doing since we last talked about 7 weeks ago?
Well, that flew by, which describes just how busy I've been, how insane life has been.
Well,
So,
that's always good.
yes, I travel quite a bit for work. I was averaging about a flight a week to a city, but oftentimes in that one flight, it would be several days. So we'd fly for 4 days, and it'd be four cities, and we'd be shooting two or three interviews uh, on each of the following days. That was taking a lot out of me.
Wow, yeah. Is it worse because of the COVID restrictions and all that?
Miserable. So it's
Yeah.
just a traumatizing flying experience where I remember being a kid, and the plane was a magical place and the flight attendants were kind, and I looked forward to getting those little cookies.
Yeah.
And now it's just everybody seems upset that you're there, and it's just a very anxiety inducing experience that I don't like.
Yeah. Anyone daring to not wear a mask on the plane or no?
Me. But
And
well, so typically it's a cat and mouse game of just trying to keep it as low as I can
okay.
without, because if you take it off completely, it will they will, if you haven't taken off yet, they'll pull the plane back in and kick you off the plane and arrest you and put you on a no-fly list for that particular airline.
Okay.
And because I need to fly for my job, I've decided to not go to that extreme.
If you just pretend you're sleeping and it's just drooping down, is that okay?
Nope, they forcibly jab you in the shoulder and wake you up. It's happened to me several times. Yeah.
Uh, I bought myself a little neck fan for it's supposed to keep your head cool in the summer, but I don't need my head cool. I hate being
Uh-huh.
cold, but I just got it to blow under my mask because I got a mask that's like a neck gaiter, so it's like a
Yes.
big thing. So I was gonna put it under there, but it's too big and bulky and it's too noisy. So I just wanted some oxygen, you know.
I just wanted to breathe. I just wanted to have free breathe. Yes. Well,
The good old days we used to be able to breathe freely.
I remember.
Yeah. So, speaking of your travels, what sorts of interviews is your team doing, and how active are you? Are you just behind the camera? Or are you? What are you doing?
So it's a dual um, enterprise with myself and my co-director Matthew, who's got about 20 more years of experience than I do in this industry. And so it's he and I carrying around about 200 pounds of equipment to each of these cities and setting up and taking down in about 3 hours with each of these individuals. So, for
Wow.
example, we were just in Missouri, and we interviewed a man by the name of David L. Gray, who was a former 32nd degree Scottish Rite Freemason, who converted to Catholicism
Oh,
some years ago. And so we were asking him about all of the Masonic aspersions that we hear, that, oh, the Masons do this, this, and this, and we were just trying to figure out if any of that was legitimate. And it turns out
interesting.
quite a lot of it is legitimate. He had a remarkable testimony that we were able to capture.
Yeah. So he was pretty firm that the church condemns and has always condemned Freemasonry.
Yes, well, he sort of took it from the other standpoint, which is that Masonry was an explicit inversion of the church.
Okay.
And so when he personally came to, so he grew up in the AME Church, the American Methodist something Episcopalian, and something like 38% of all AME members are Freemasons. And if you
Ooh.
want to be a pastor, you have to be a Freemason. And so he grew up in this Protestant church, but didn't even really know or understand Jesus or Christianity. He thought Jesus was just like a figure, wise teacher. And later down the line, when he came to understand that he was a real person, is when things started to shift. And eventually, he realized that Christ was a real person and Christianity was incompatible with Freemasonry, and he was also experiencing some demonic attacks, having gone very far down the occult. And so, in an attempt to stop engaging with a plane of existence he knew he was not supposed to be engaging with, he got baptized, and all of the attacks ceased.
Nice. Yeah. So he's pretty on fire for his faith now.
Yeah, but a very even keel
Yeah.
person.
Slow burn.
Slow burn, not evangelical. He's just very matter of fact that, you know, he'll describe a demonic experience very matter of factly, and it's rather unsettling. So, and then he also, one of the things we've been focusing on is the Freemason, and have you heard of the Carbonari?
Carbonari. It sounds familiar. What is that?
It's an Italian iteration of Freemasonry, made up of Freemasons, but not a product of Freemasonry. And its stated goal in a document called the Alta Vendita was to,
Oh yeah, I read that one.
yeah, it was to undermine the Catholic Church from the inside. And Monsignor George F. Dillon, I guess, apprehended this document, which the Alta Vendita, which was sent out to the various hovels of the Carbonari,
Okay.
and presented it to Pope Pius the something or another in 18 something or another, 1832-ish.
Okay.
And that's when they were put on blast.
Oh wow. So you're convinced it's a legitimate document? It's a historical document of the Carbonari or whatever they're called.
The document is historic, and more than that, the evidence of their plan seems to be have come to fruition enough that I'm convinced that the stories about what they were planning on doing were real.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Within the church today, you can see all kinds of signs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't know. I read that. It's a very small document. I read it a while ago, maybe 7 years ago, and I took it with a grain of salt because I take everything with a grain of salt. But if it's true, I mean, if they really came up with that, it's pretty nasty, and they're pretty open, which I admire. I admire the openness of it. Like we're going to destroy the church, and they're not making any bones about it. But I guess it was designed as an internal document, not to be shared with the public.
Yep. Yeah, it was a memo, kind of like this is okay, everybody who joined the Carbonari, this is why you're here, and this is what we're doing. And I found that it seems to be a trend among the Machiavellian to flaunt what they're doing. If you look at the Bill Gates or the Klaus Schwabs or the Rockefellers of the world, they write and publish memos very publicly. And if you only read them, it's rather revealing. For example, Operation Lockstep, which was a 2011 Rockefeller document, which outlines the utility of a global pandemic and the consolidation of authoritarian powers under a one world government. And it describes you know, wearing masks and all these different things. And it's just 2020, but in a 2011 document, you know.
Yeah.
So they
Scary.
flaunt these things.
Yeah, I guess the old Catholic proverb is that Satan can't enter your home unless you invite him in. Or is that a myth from the vampire mythology that you can't have that they can't come in unless you invite them in? I'm getting confused now.
It sounds like both.
They probably borrowed it for the vampire stuff. They borrowed it
Yeah.
from the Catholic thing.
Well, I'm starting to wonder if are you familiar with the term fictionalism?
Not really, but it's where you fictionalize everything.
It's where everything that's fiction is actually true.
Oh, okay. No, I haven't heard about that. No.
So as a dreamer and as a romanticist, that was a very enticing concept to me. The idea that unicorns and Atlantis and Lord of the Rings can all be people perceiving true facts about the world through their creative mind and then presenting it in a narrative form.
Yeah.
And so part of me wonders if things like vampires are absolutely real.
Yeah. There's a way of interpreting everything, and including fiction, interpreting it spiritually, and I would definitely not find it difficult to see the reality behind every lie and behind every myth and behind every story and behind every fictional character, because we can only work with what we've experienced. And so if we've experienced it, there is some reality. Now, how disguised is it, and how twisted and Frankenstein is it, with all the different parts going together? Like, a lot of artists in Montreal think they're very edgy because they'll take a baby doll and they'll chop the head off and put a horse doll's head on it, and they think, oh wow, it's so edgy. But so many artists are doing that. But horses exist, babies exist, and dolls exist, and horse dolls exist, and we're not really creating. Only God creates. We're just moving things around and trying to be edgy sometimes. But
yeah, yeah. What is it? Nothing new under the sun. Is that Ecclesiastes?
Yeah. But a lot of the art in Montreal, like the sort of low-level amateur art, is naked breasts, penises, and devil horns.
Ooh, edgy.
And and twisty, twisted up body parts.
Right.
When I was a Satanist, I used to draw, like, for example, women with 3 breasts or 4 breasts or 5 breasts or 6 breasts or anything but 2 breasts.
Never one. You never just did one.
I don't think so, because it's just too ugly. The mono boob has never been popular.
I totally forgot that you dabbled in Satanism.
Yeah. I wasn't a very good one, but
I guess of the things to be derelict at, Satanism is probably the best thing.
Not very devout, but it did lead me to God, because the atheistic Satanism that I belong to put reason as its God, so reason, truth, and all this sort of thing. And I was seeking the truth, and I did find the truth because I was sincerely seeking the truth. And I hope that a lot of Satanists are sincerely seeking the truth, but the ones I meet online just seem to hate the truth, from what I can gather. But
so what you just said brought crashing back something that's been on the mind. So the end of the interview with that Freemason threw me for a loop, and I really haven't taken a moment to process it yet. So he was explaining how the stated goal of Freemasonry was to deconstruct the moral order that was put forth by the church, and to reconstruct it with man's reason as the guiding light, as opposed to, God. Now, then in this conversation, I then brought up Genesis 2, the fall. So we have the proposition to Eve to become knowledgeable about good and evil, and to become like God. And then he was explaining how the further he got down, and this will come out in the film, but this guy, he didn't want to say what he was experiencing. He said, I don't want to make it sexy to explain the phenomena that I was experiencing from the demonic, because I don't want people to pursue this. And thanks be to God, my co-director did push him, because he did share something remarkable, and that was that he wasn't satisfied with what he was learning in Freemasonry. And so he went down the path of the occult and started learning more and more things, until he started hearing voices talking, not to him, but just talking as he was going about his life. And he realized that he was hearing another plane of existence. And it was very troubling to him, extremely upsetting. At this point in the interview, he began crying. And he said, I realized that I was seeing something that I knew I was not supposed to see. And then he got baptized. The voices stopped. And this just set up a set of premises for me that was extremely upsetting, because I come from a place of, I just need to learn the next thing
Mm-hmm.
and it will be okay. And he basically said, you aren't supposed to know. And not only are you not supposed to know, but if you do, it will destroy you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I was thinking about the beginning of John, and the beginning was the Logos. The Logos was made flesh and dwelt among us. And so all of this stuff just came crashing back to me full circle. And this paradigm was set up of almost invalidating the pursuit of knowledge as the highest good. And I'm struggling with that so badly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would just simply point out that the Ten Commandments are a good guide to everything in terms of your thoughts, your words, and your deeds, and they can all be summarized in the first commandment, which is to put God first and to love Him and to strive to know Him and to serve Him, so that you can be happy with Him, basically. So I use the Ten Commandments as sort of the guiding principle or principles, depending on how deep you want to dive into the subcases within that one commandment, which is the love of God, because within that you can split it up multiple ways. But depending on how deep you get into it, there's one principle or multiple principles. But I use that as a guide for my thoughts, my words, and my deeds. I mean, in principle, I use it as a guide. And if you watch me day to day, I'm just acting like an average Satanist, just not being very, very holy. Not I've been having a bit of a crisis lately, because everything I'm reading is talking about good works, and I'm just like, I've never done a good work. So when does that begin? So I'm exaggerating a little bit. I've done a few little minuscule good works, but yeah, with the Ten Commandments, the idea is to be holy in your thought, holy in your words, holy in your deeds. And so that precludes any sort of seeking knowledge for knowledge's sake or being curious. One of the first things that upset me when I discovered Christianity, when I discovered God and then Christianity, was the sort of poo-pooing of curiosity that I read in a lot of the Catholic saints. And that bothered me, because I thought that curiosity brought me to God. It was this quest for knowledge.
Yes.
But there's a Catholic understanding of curiosity, which is, it's a very frivolous activity, curiosity, within the Catholic jargon. There is, over against that frivolous pursuit of curious knowledge, there is the true responsibility we have to know God and to know our neighbor, and above all, to know ourselves, because you can't get to heaven if we don't know ourselves. If we're deluded about who we are, then we'll just think, I'm okay, you're okay, and just have a very complacent attitude toward sin. So knowledge of self is, in some ways, even more important than knowledge of God. But
you set up two premises there. Well, we sparked a thought, and you set up a premise of fealty.
Okay.
Right? And you've talked about this before in the past. That
not with that word. I'm not familiar with that word. Fealty just means some sort of
submission.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, as a humility, a recognition of subservience.
Yeah.
And that I'm realizing how much the Gnostics have saturated our society, right? That it is the highest thing to become the most knowledgeable. That you're a more actualized person if you just learn more things than the people around you. And I brought this up at a Bible study. We do Bible study in the morning at work, and nice. We were in John. I actually can't remember if this happens in John or not, but Jesus tells Thomas, "Blessed are they who have not seen and yet still believe." And so I, raised my hand and said, okay, so it sounds to me like Jesus is setting up a relationship between three things: how good you are as a person, how much you know, and how much you believe. And the relationship that he seems to be presenting is you are a better person if you know less and believe more. And I said, does that make anyone else as uncomfortable as it makes me? and and yet, and this is sort of the full circle understanding of like, okay, you have Freemasonry, and if I were just painting with a broad brush, the Illuminati, those who seek knowledge for knowledge's sake, the secret societies, seem to be at the root of some of the worst things that are happening on Earth today. And if that's the case, and I recognize the fruits of that as evil,
yeah.
then it seems like I should be orienting myself toward not pursuing the greatest amount of knowledge that I could possibly cram into my head. And that brings up the idea of fealty, of submission, of authoritarianism. And over the last year and a half, I went on the political compass from staunch libertarian to hardcore authoritarian right wing, thinking and understanding and appreciating that perhaps people just being as free as they could possibly be is not a good idea. That maybe it's actually a really, really bad idea if we can just do it all. And it's these two ideas and are kind of coming back in harmony with each other, that, hey, perhaps it is the case that the human spirit can bite off more than it can chew.
For sure. Yeah. So a couple of things you said there got me thinking about the relationship between faith and understanding or reason. And if you've even done a cursory overview of the history of Christianity, you'll see a lot of talk about faith and reason, and how it's couched in the Catholic Church, at least, is that you first take the plunge into faith, and then it's faith seeking understanding, right? St. Augustine talks about this, and then the second St. Augustine, St. Anselm, talks about this later in the 12th century. But from my own personal experience, I can tell you that I was seeking from adolescence onward, like from the time I became an atheist at age 14, I just dove right into philosophy, not deeply, but just superficially. And it was always on my mind, and seeking truth and whatever. And I studied physics at university, and I did a lot of seeking in terms of the well-ordered universe that we live in. I took a philosophical approach to my studies. And I delved then more deeply after wandering around, traveling, having fun with my wife. I delved more deeply once we settled down into philosophy. And so always seeking the truth. But it's only when I had faith, the gift of faith, that I accepted, because I cooperated with those unmerited graces of God. Because I said yes to the grace of faith and was converted, I was flooded with a new appreciation for the natural sciences, for philosophy, for theology, of course, for the scriptures and everything that bewildered me before. Because I'd been studying the Bible as an enemy of the church for years, just mocking and ridiculing. But I can tell you that the leap of faith brings with it all kinds of gifts of the Holy Spirit. So you've got wisdom, understanding, counsel, fortitude, knowledge, piety, fear of the Lord. And it just cleans, partially at least, some of those lenses so that you can appreciate more. And that's not to say that you take the leap of faith and become a great genius, but relative to groping in the dark, just having a little bit of clarity through some of those lenses is a big improvement. And you have, above all, you have peace, right? You have peace. So that goes a long way. I mean, this last year has been rough for me because of COVID, and I've been sort of dancing with the devil a little bit with some temptation with video games, because I've just been bored playing video games. And I won't go into detail, but a lot of video games have sex and violence components, and I'm just attracted to that. So I've been dancing with the devil a little bit, but luckily I have enough grace to go to confession, and I'm fighting it off, and I'm trying to It's not like an addiction or anything, but it is a temptation just because there's a lot of boredom. So play video games, whatever. Okay. But my point is that I when I dabble with sin, even though it's not grave sin, I mean, I don't think I'm getting as far into as to commit grave sin, but just dabbling and being excited by stuff and what I feel the darkness overcome me, and I feel my prayer life is diminished, my ability to see and understand the truths of the gospel is diminished. Everything is just clouded.
Huh.
My understanding is diminished, and then I go to confession, and boom, it's just a lot of clarity. So this is what faith does, and this is what renewing your faith through the sacraments does. And it's an ongoing struggle. I mean, I'm back now going more frequently to the sacraments. I found a priest where I can confess regularly every 2 weeks. And I'm getting on top of some of my sort of lazy, bad habits, which is sort of just going into self-indulgence and just being lazy and indulging in sin, even if it's not really a big deal. Like, I mean, what I've been doing is not really that embarrassing or that bad, but for me, because I have so many graces, it doesn't take much, right? Like, I mean, even just looking at women on the street, a lot of sexy women on the street in Montreal, especially in the spring. So even that, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's enough to cloud me. It's enough to, I have to go to confession and cleanse that and try not to look at the sexy women. And so it doesn't take much. Once you have the faith, the bar is raised and the standard's higher. So I could never do the things I was doing before when I was a Satanist. I was like masturbating in public and doing all kinds of sick shit in cemeteries and defiling grave sites and doing all kinds of stuff. I had my genitalia plastered on a huge wall in downtown Montreal as an art exhibit. I was like fully erect and with it was like huge pornography basically. It's plastered against the side of a building with a full-on projection. So I was doing all kinds of sick stuff as a Satanist. I'm not doing any of that now.
You weren't a devout Satanist. That sounds like a very devout Satanist.
Yeah, well, I dabbled a little bit. I'm not proud of what I did, but I mean, it could have been a lot worse. So just to say that the standard changes once you have the grace of faith. Once you take that leap of faith, the standard changes. So what seems like a little temptation or a little sin now to most people, to me, is still enough to cloud my judgment, to cloud my understanding and what little wisdom I have and stuff like that. So I think faith is all important. I have the reason I'm going on and on about this is not to brag about my sins. It's to tell you that faith does clean those lenses a certain amount. I mean, I don't have obviously a lot of clarity even when I'm in the state of grace, but compared to the great saints, but it's relative to when I was indulging in sin. So I think it's very important to understand that, and I'm telling you that it's a very practical experience I have with it. It's not just something I read in a book.
Right. Would you say that faith can be understood also as a command?
No, it's an invitation, because I what scares me most about my faith is that I know how free I am. Like, I mean, I have the Blessed Virgin Mary looking at me here on the other side of my computer screen, and I was sitting here on the computer playing video games, and it's like sex and violence, So, I mean, I have her there to protect me and to not let me go into anything that's not good, but I still did because I'm free. So, and then I stop and go to confession and delete the video games, whatever, and then I'll buy a new I bought a series of video games thinking, oh, this one won't be, there won't be sex or violence in this one, but then it turns out there is. And these games are like designed for people like 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, whatever. It's like, holy cow, I'm 51 and I can't handle it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. There's a few things there.
Well, the main answer was that I'm free. I'm not commanded to have faith. I'm very free. I could walk away at any time, and that's scary.
So I can't remember if I brought up this question in the past, but I'll try it again. So something that is perplexing to me is how a God who is all good, who produces creation that is also all good, how that creation can then produce evil or produce anything that isn't goodness. My understanding of evil is it's a privation
Yeah.
of good.
Yeah.
And so how can something that is created good have the capacity to withdraw from that which is good?
Well, the same way that if you're on a bumpy stagecoach going over a log road and you're trying to build a house of cards with your 54 cards, you're asking me how can it not stand? How can it not be a perfect structure and stable? Well, because of the chaos, you know. So, I mean, as it falls away from that pyramid form that you want to build, that's the evil. It's the way that it's falling away from the good. In God's way of being and way of acting and thinking and doing, what he wants he gets, and what he wants is good, and so he builds something. It's solid. This is what Jesus said, you have to build on a solid foundation. So we're in the midst of chaos that we're creating ourselves, and we're wondering why our projects are failing and falling away from the good and falling away from the ideal. And we have people preaching now that everything is just a random assortment of things that have banged into each other, and that's where life came from. So this, you know, our evolution mindset makes us think, well, let's just bang things around some more, because that's how we got here, by things banging around randomly. So let's just bang things around. But if you're trying to build something that's well ordered, you don't just bang it around, right? You have to respect the nature of everything, and this is what evolution theory doesn't do. It doesn't respect that natures even exist. So the answer to the question is that everything is ontologically good. Everything is ontologically good, but it's the way that it's done that can be wrong when finite creatures do things, and that frankly I think is almost always done wrong. I mean, other than Jesus Christ, who is a God-man, you have Mary, who never sinned, not even a venial sin, because she had this special grace not to sin, and she cooperated with that grace. That's why we revere her so much, because she cooperated with the grace to never sin, not even a venial sin. And perhaps a couple of others like St. John the Baptist and St. Joseph, her spouse, and stuff like that. But not too many that didn't engage in venial sin. So basically 99.9999999 whatever % of humans are doing it wrong at some point.
If we're ontologically good, but it sounds like you're presenting God's creations as entropic, that they trend toward chaos and disorder and doing things in an ungodly way, whether it be the angels or humanity. Would that be fair?
Yeah, for me, I mean, even if you read the great saints, like one of my favorite saints is Saint Anselm, and he talks about how sluggish and dull he is when he tries to do something spiritual or good or for God. But when it comes time to indulging in selfishness or pride or whatever it is other than serving God, he's sharp as a tack. He can think clearly. He's got everything flowing. But when he tries to serve God, everything is hard, awkward, sluggish. And that's a great saint. So with me, I can attest to you personally, like trying to, like I told you at the outset of this interview, trying to do good works. It's like I can barely even think of one that I did. But I mean, if I make it my project to submit to God's will and to do God's will and to be good and to have faith and persevere in my faith and to cooperate with the graces and to do good works and all the rest, it's hard. So yeah, if you want to call that entropic, I call it concupiscence, the tendency to sin. And fighting against it is bloody hard. I mean, I'm frustrated and annoyed, especially because I'm neglecting the sacraments. But with God's grace, now I'm coming back to a more regular instance of the sacraments, and it is helping. So I think if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. That's what I've experienced this year.
It seems strange that there was such an inflection point with the fall where we have creatures who are created good, who know God in a way that you and I can't even possibly imagine. They walk with him in the garden. And and yet they do choose to not obey him, which still just perplexes me.
Mm-hmm.
But then that also mangled their spirit, their essence, such that you and I are born with that concupiscence.
Yeah, it's
That's just,
mind-boggling.
it's mind-boggling. Because that would have to, the fact that we have to try and swim upstream to be good people means one of two things. Either the thing that we're trying to make ourselves do isn't good, or our nature has been perverted such that we have to inject energy into the system in order to actually do the things that are objectively good.
Yeah, I think the solution is probably a lot easier and more obvious than you and I are aware of. I think some of the saints talk about the sort of simplicity and just being natural, and avoiding the complexity of sort of anxiety of how to please God, but just being the image that I like to use is like if I were your pet dog, like you, Nick Stumphauser, if you had a cute little white pet dog, poodle, it's tiny and it's cute. I want to be in this analogy. I want to be that white dog. I would know right now. I know how to please my master, Nick Stumphauser. I know how to please you. How do I do it? When you say sit, I sit. When you say walk, I walk. When you say stop eating, I stop eating. Whatever it is.
Right.
And I have a nice disposition. I'm always smiling, happy, and cute.
Yes.
So that's what I need to do with God. I just need to be that that good, cute little dog.
Right.
It seems very, very, very easy and simple. Just be a good boy. That's it. That's what I use.
Yeah. Wow. That's it. Kind of goes back to the idea of fealty. Like the king doesn't need you to go, hey, what about this? Hey, what about that? He's just be.
Or I'm hungry again.
Yeah. All that kind of stuff. Interesting.
Because the hungers we have are not good for us. Like, hey, I want to eat with my eyes. I want to eat this image and that image and the other image. Well, that's not good for us. So.
And that's so, again, this is where the Gnostics have permeated our culture to such a large degree that we think, what was it, Aquinas, who said that sin is believing that we know how to make ourselves happy more than God knows how. Mm. And when I heard that, it just hit me right between the eyes. It's like, well, then I am a grave sinner because I consult no one but myself. In fact, I'm the expert, yet ironically, I'm fucking miserable.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Ecclesiastes earlier, right?
Yes.
That's a good one to read, the first couple of paragraphs of that one, or the whole thing. And he ends with the fear of God. You know, that's the way to go. And by fear of God, it's just picture that cute poodle that wants to please Nick Stumphauser, and everything about that obedience is good and healthy for that cute little white dog. Right. It's funny. Were you ever such a hardcore atheist that image would have disgusted you, and you would have thought that Christianity is demeaning to humanity for even allowing the possibility of making that analogy?
No question. I mean, even now, I can only let it play in my head because I've made such immense progress toward where I'm at. Because it does upset me. However, in the same way that I recognize a parent knowing what's best for their complaining and belligerent child, how much more magnified would that be? And then the question is, okay, well, where do I go to find the instructions of God? And of course, the Christian would say, well, in the book you wrote, dumbass.
I wouldn't say that. I would say go to the church and find out what the church teaches about the interpretation of the book.
And that right there has been such a roller coaster because I work for a Protestant institution, but I was raised Catholic. And so every time we interview a Catholic, just this consternation arises of like, what do you mean tradition? Like you made that up. That's man-made. And and this is one wheelhouse where I feel very comfortable defending the church of the necessity of sacred tradition. But you have no scripture without sacred tradition. You have no Bible without the church.
Yeah.
So
You
that's
get
been
that part.
amusing.
You get that piece. Like that's intuitive for you.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yep, it does, and then that also sort of lends credence to the idea of authoritarianism having a place, right? As long as the authority is correct, then authoritarianism does make some sense. I think Aristotle even understood this intuitively many thousands of years ago when he said that there's a natural aristocracy and there's a natural slave class. Not everyone has the innate capacities to rule a country.
Yeah, Plato talked about the philosopher king and all that
Yes.
sort of thing.
99.9% of people are eating paint, right? And I know this because I see one individual in an empty car wearing a mask. This is why I know the populace ought not be in control of things. So the idea of, yes, just be the good dog, it just requires endless humbling, which
Yeah.
I think also when you invite that sort of humbling, God is never going to let you down if you ask to be humbled.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't find it demeaning at all, and I want to explain to you, I'm not a big dog or cat person or pet person. I'm not really a fan of having pets. But when I picture a cute little happy dog that's obedient and it has a good master, obviously. So I've seen pet owners that abuse their pets, and that disgusts me. And the pet is not happy.
Right.
No matter how obedient he tries to be, you should not be obedient to that kind of master. Just run away. Right. That's what I think. Run away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I say to atheists when they say, "Well, God's mean. God's this. God's that." I'm just like, run away from that God, because that God is a demon. Right?
Yeah.
Run away from that God.
Yeah.
Any God you're superior to in any way, run away from it. So It's the same thing with a bad pet owner. But my point I'm trying to make here with that cute little white dog that's obedient to his good master is that is not only an ontologically good dog, but it's a joy to behold. Like, I mean, it's something, it's a window into God. I think that's the way a lot of saints, like Saint Francis of Assisi, saw the animal world, even the plant world, but the animal world even more so, where you catch a little glimpse of God, his goodness, his humility, his gentleness, whatever it is. And so that's why it's not demeaning to me. It's not complete. It's just a partial glimpse. But it's a glimpse, it's a real glimpse of something real about God. And the reason I say something that the dog in my analogy is a glimpse of God and not a glimpse of me, the slave boy, is because our mission in submission is to be like God. That's the whole point, right? That promise that Satan made, that you'll be like God. Why did he say that? Because he just gave a little twist to the truth. The truth is, that's our goal. Our goal is to be with God, to partake of God's attributes in a finite way, but to really participate in the divine life of the Trinity and all that goes along with that, the infinite joy, and to participate in that, partake of that. So every lie of Satan has a lot of truth in it, a lot of truth, but just that little twist.
If your analogy holds true, then we from the beginning were driving in a stagecoach along a bumpy log road. Do you think it was the fall inevitable?
I think so. I think
falls.
So.
Yeah,
I think so.
Okay,
yeah,
it kind of would have to be.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at the difference, the gap between the finite and the infinite, the gap between the perfect and the imperfect. I mean, we can acknowledge that God made us perfect, but when we acknowledge the free will that we have, that it immediately tells me that if we can fall, we will fall.
Just given enough time.
Yeah. Now, how much time did it take? How much time does it take? Different saints have received different visions about the book of Genesis and what happened in the garden. Some of them had enough information to surmise what part of the day the fall took place and how many hours they'd been alive. Right? It wasn't long, It was not long. So, I mean, it was definitely within that first day, and they're 12 hours in a day. So, I mean, I can't remember what these saints said that I have read, but it was something like it was in the morning, which meant it was after bed.
His head pops off the pillow and they just fuck it up. They didn't even make it through the day. Oh, man.
Was it a Sunday or a Monday when they were created? I don't remember. Anyway, Monday mornings, you know what it's like.
Yeah, they didn't have their coffee. Satan rolls up. Well, so it makes me wonder then how sort of deterministic a lot of this is, in that, okay, God, who is omniscient, creates mankind perfectly with the capacity of freedom of will, and then he knows in his all-knowingness the inevitability of a fall.
Yeah.
So probably from the moment he created the world, Jesus is like, are you sure? Like, because you know what I'm going to have to do if we do this. So then it kind of, this is why I said when, I think I said it last time, either Christianity is false and just a cute fairy tale, or it is the most informative narrative on the nature of reality and God that you could possibly study.
Yeah.
Because if you just explore Genesis, that means all the things we just talked about.
There's
now
so
we
many
get to
implications.
Yes. Okay. The implication of God created us knowing that we would fall and knowing he would have to sacrifice his son. Why would he do that? What does that tell us about him and his son and the nature of reality? And because a story places bounds up about the characters, right? So God is boundless. However, the story seems to indicate that he made humanity and angels, and he didn't make the things in Men in Black, the little alien-looking guys, right? He made us, and then this is the way that history transpired. And it could have been otherwise, but it was like this. Therefore, we can intuit that there's attributes of God based on this narrative.
It is a dogma of the church, I want you to know, that God could have made a better world. That's a dogma of the church. He could have made a better one. He could have made it better. Okay, so there was something going around the time of Voltaire, the best of all possible worlds. We live in the best of all. It was a Catholic guy saying we live in the best of all possible worlds, and Voltaire made fun of that idea with Candide, the very funny book. You should read it if you haven't read it, Candide. But I have sympathy for Voltaire. He actually dedicated that book, I think, to the current pope of his time. But he was sort of the kind of atheist that I like, that's tortured by his atheism, you know? Even though he persisted, I think, unto his death. But he was tortured by his atheism. And I don't know if you were or are, or if it's lessening or worsening or what, but that's the kind of atheist I like, one that struggles with it, as opposed to just thinking, well, I'm a genius, believers are idiots, and that's where it ends.
Yeah, the prodigal was born of my suffering.
Yeah.
The podcast journey that I did, that we met on, was a product of, I am in despair, I am suicidal, I'm nihilistic, I have zero reason to inhale and exhale.
That's your Tinder profile too, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Check really, magnet.
Yeah, it really just brings them in. And
sorry to break your thought there.
No problem. And so I thought, if this is the product of this worldview, why not try and disprove it? Because if I'm right, I won't be able to. And it was that commitment to truth that you had as a Satanist, that I had as an atheist, that even though it was largely biased and disingenuous, like it was so much pride in me 2 years ago when I started this out. But I just had enough that gave me that traction.
Enough humility?
Enough humility and enough commitment to to truth above all, like, because you can still be a prideful atheist who's committed to truth, and then the battle becomes, is the thing that you learn that disproves the thing that you believe going to win? Because then you have to decide, okay, is it pride or do I care about truth? Which one's more important to me? And it was in that process that I got back the thing that I wanted in the world, which was believing that it's magical.
Yeah. So where are you in terms of, I always think in terms of monotheism is the most important thing. And then if you're a monotheist, I think it's pretty obvious you should be a Christian. I think if you're a Christian, it's pretty obvious you should be a Catholic. And if you're a Catholic, I think it's pretty obvious you should be a saint. But that's not easy. It's not necessarily easy. But are you a monotheist, or have you toyed with it? Or are you a Christian? Have you toyed with it? Where are you on that sort of spectrum that I like to dabble with?
Thomistic and Aristotelian theist.
Okay.
And I think that makes me a monotheist.
Yeah.
And then I am saturated with Christianity day in and day out. So I think
culturally Christian.
No, culturally stubborn, but very much open-minded to it. I really am struggling with a lot of the precepts of Christ, and I do think it will require a move of fealty and humility to go from what we talked about to the, okay, I will submit. It has to be a submission because I don't understand it. It doesn't make rational sense. I disagree with it. But if I simply look at the fruits, assuming that there's only two options, the fruits of Christianity and then the fruits of Freemasonry, Satanism, Illuminati, all these different things, then my choice is extremely easy to make.
Yeah. This is the not yet, but Pope Francis just made this the year of Saint Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits.
Of course he did.
And he's one of my favorite saints. And he has an image, a beautiful image of two hills with two groups of people that are gathering under two banners or standards. One is that of Christ and one is that of Satan, Antichrist, or whatever you want to call him. Well, I guess the Antichrist technically is not Satan, but Christ or Satan. So you've described this sort of fundamental option, the sort of choice that is very clear for you. If those are the two choices, you're with Christ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Saint Ignatius says very clearly those are the two choices. Now, the big hurdle for you is understanding that those are the choices. Those are the options. There's one choice to make. Those are your two options. Now, if you talk to a typical atheist, they'll say, well, what about Hinduism? What about Buddhism? What about this? What about that? Jehovah's Witness, and they'll just try to dilute the problem. But that's where your monotheism is deadly to them, because your monotheism, to me, is everything. I mean, you should be jumping up and down celebrating, I think, but for that one thing of submission. But to me, I want you to stop thinking in terms of religion and rules and all this sort of thing. I want you to start thinking in terms of love and romantic love.
I can do that a lot
Not the way you
easier.
submit, not the way you submit to your mother or your doctor or your lawyer or whatever, but the way you submit, or to a policeman, but the way you submit to a woman that the magic that you want in the world. I mean, the best example for me is a woman, a beautiful woman.
How
Beautiful
convenient,
inside
David.
and out. Yeah.
I just entered a relationship.
Ooh.
So it's very convenient timing.
Yes, it is.
I'll be curious to see the parallels of that. You've been married now for how many years?
26.
26 years. Wow.
You've been going out with this girl for how long? 5 minutes?
Sunday. We've been dating for about 3 months.
Okay.
But made it official this past Sunday. So that's
Nice.
basically 26 years, you know?
But that's your key to taking the leap of faith. That is, you should focus all your attention on romantic love and what does it mean to commit, because it's the same commitment.
Why'd you have to say that?
Do you have commitment issues or no?
Well, I feel like that's a trope that I get uncomfy about. That's a stereotype.
Okay.
But I have commitment skepticism, we'll
Okay.
say, which is probably the identical etiology of my religious skepticism. You know, my lack of. I really do think it is the same sort of origin. The well, what if there's all these things that I don't yet know? Therefore, I'm not going to submit, because what if I learned something and I realized this was a terrible mistake?
Yeah, but I took the complete leap of faith into Catholicism, not believing it. I took a leap of faith. I said, I'm in 100% until I find a reason to leave. I did not believe it when I joined. I did not believe it. I just said, I'm in 100%. And I'm going to spend all my time and energy trying to find out that it's false. But the more I dug, the more I was reassured that it's true. But I did not care if it was true, because I only tentatively dove in. But I dove in, that's the key. I dove in completely. Same thing with my woman that I met. I knew there were other women. I knew there were maybe more attractive women or more compatible with me, because we had conflict. It wasn't all rosy, but there was a wave of energy and a circumstance, and it's like, I met this woman at this bar at this time in my life, and this is what's happening. All the signals were there, like, David, you're being served something here, right?
Hey.
So it's ringing some bells for you.
It's doing, and it looks like I'm out of time already.
Yeah. Very convenient, very convenient. Yeah, I do have to go because my woman is, she hasn't eaten yet. She's making a sacrifice so that I can do this podcast with you. Because usually I get home and I cook dinner, but I had to come home and find my microphone and my camera because I've been disconnected. But really great to see you. I'm going to leave you to digest all my little hints about how to be a good boy. And I'm really excited about where this is going, and I'm also looking forward to talking to you again.
Very exciting. I appreciate you doing this again, and please thank your wife for the time granted to us.
Not a problem, and I love you lots, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Love you much, David. Take care.
Bye. Bye.